best known for his appearances in the video game series Dynasty Warriors, or The Romance of Three Kingdoms, one of the oldest fanfictions ever written, or the manga Record of Ragnarok, set to come out with its own animated adaptation. Libu, the Flying General, was known for many things. In The Romance of Three Kingdoms, Libu was heavily romanticized as a lover for a fictional maid, whereas in Dynasty Warriors and Record of Ragnarok, the video game and the manga/anime choose to focus on Libu's unparalleled might and power. Although not the most successful general of his time, he has certainly racked up more of a reputation since his execution 2,000 years ago. Therefore, I will be examining Libu's historical period and his military career to see how well this reputation stacks up to reality. Libu was a general who lived during the late Han Dynasty. This period is sandwiched between the Qin Dynasty and the Three Warring States period. The Han Dynasty in itself is also divided into two halves, split between the Western Han and the Eastern Han. We will begin in chronological order with the Western Han Dynasty. I really don't want to bore you guys with many names. However, after the balkanization of the Qin Dynasty, two generals rose to prominence and duked it out. Victor got to rule over China. These two were Sang Lu of the state of Chu and Liu Bang of the state of Han. Based on the name scheme of the period, you can guess who won. It was Liu Bang. Definitely Liu Bang. Liu Bang became emperor and reunited China under the Han Dynasty. Although I cannot name all of the achievements of the Western Han Dynasty, that requires far too much research. However, their most notable achievement was crippling the Xiongnu, basically the Mongols before the Mongols. With their primary enemy out of the way, the Han Dynasty was capable of creating diplomatic relationships with other civilizations, forming the groundwork for the Silk Road. You've probably heard of that from your history class. Although things look pretty good, the Western Han Dynasty did come to a close, and I will tell you how. Since the title of Emperor was forced upon a child, which by the way happens a lot, another figure was appointed to the task. This guy was named Wangmang, and he basically wanted to start his own dynasty. This also happens quite a lot. Thus, he began the Qin Dynasty, officially ending the Western Han period. However, Wang Mang's reign didn't last very long, only lasting 14 years before members of the nobility and the rebellious peasantry jumped his bitch ass. The Han Dynasty was shortly reinstated, starting the Eastern Han Dynasty. After the tumultuous years of the Qin Dynasty, two major events happened. 1. The Han Emperor died, and his 13-year-old son, Liu Bea, became emperor. Because he wasn't fit to utilize his authority, most imperial duties were carried out by the emperor's eunuchs. The eunuchs were members of the central government who were castrated and unable to create dynasties of their own. Although they did stay loyal to the emperor, they were incredibly corrupt and used their power to bolster their personal wealth. 2. The Yellow River experienced a large flood, displacing many peasants and farmers. Because of these floods, most peasants could no longer sustain themselves, and with additional taxes imposed by the eunuchs, they started organizing large-scale rebellions, posing a very legitimate threat to the central government. Therefore, the central government sponsored independent regional warlords to crush the rebellions in specific regions. Although successful, it would turn out to be a poor decision because the central government lost much of its autonomy by sponsoring them, handing most of the authority to the warlords. So you can guess what happens next. Anyways, we're gonna list a whole bunch of names. The downfall of the Han Dynasty began with two generals, Yan Sa and Yan Su, who were siblings. These two generals mounted a raid on the Han capital, murdering most of the eunuchs and displacing the young emperor Liu Bea. Then Liu Bea was deposed and murdered by another general named Dong Zhou, who not only occupied the Han capital and appointed himself as chancellor, but also forced the emperor's brother, Liu Xia, into the position of emperor. However, Liu Xia was rescued by Cao Cao, a powerful general who had a fundamental impact on the late Han Dynasty. As for Dong Zhou, he He was made the target of a large coalition of generals due to his misconduct against the emperor, but the first blade to reach him was that of his own foster son, Li Bu. Although Li Bu finally got some action, the spotlight really belonged to Cao Cao as he successfully defended Laodicea from everybody else, making him the closest general to becoming an emperor. However, Cao Cao's reign would be hotly contested by two other generals, namely Sun Sun, who dominated South China, and Liu Bei, who dominated Western China, leaving Cao Cao with the north. These three generals and their families would ultimately delegitimize the Han Dynasty and bring forth the Three Kingdoms period in China's imperial history. This was an oversimplified explanation of the Han Dynasty as a whole. Now onto Li Bu's military career. For Li Bu's history, we'll be going off of the Record of the Three Kingdoms and the Book of the Later Han.
In the beginning,
Li Bu is from the Inner Mongolia region and was first spotted by the inspector, soon to become warlord, Ding Un. The inspector was impressed by Li Bu's marksmanship and equestrian skills. While serving under Ding Un, Li Bu was appointed as a recorder and was treated nicely despite being an outsider. However, Li Bu's tenure under Ding Un would come to an end after making contact with Dong Zhou, a general I mentioned before. Their meeting occurred in a plot to take down the eunuchs. This group effort included Ding Un, Dong Zhou, and a new fellow I didn't mention, Hu Jin. He was the primary general-in-chief of the central government. Yet, the eunuch faction caught wind of this scheme and assassinated Hu Jin, while also taking the emperor hostage. After the emperor was retrieved, Dong Zhou took the opportunity to take control over Hu Jin's army, and also convinced Li Bu to kill his own general. Li Bu's reward in doing so was a position on Dong Zhou's cavalry. So, Li Bu obliged, beheading Ding Un and presenting his head to Dong Zhou. After this sign of both loyalty and betrayal, Dong Zhou would later adopt Li Bu, placing much of his fate into his hands. Under Dong Zhou, adopting Li Bu would prove instrumental in the events to come. As Dong Zhou took control over the central government, a coalition created by Yan Sa began a campaign against Dong Zhou's tyrannical leadership. Against the coalition, Li Bu was the barrier that prevented the blade of the coalition from reaching Dong Zhou. However, the coalition proved superior to the combined might of both Li Bu and Dong Zhou, forcing its way through their forces and ultimately to the gates of the capital, forcing Dong Zhou to pillage the capital and relocate to another city. Following his retreat, the coalition capitulated and fell into disarray. Following Dong Zhou's removal from power, he became very afraid of assassination due to the colossal target put on his head. So, he kept Li Bu as his bodyguard, not only to shut down any assassination attempts, but also as an object to vent his frustrations. During his outbursts, Dong Zhou would throw sharp instruments at Li Bu, who reacted fast enough to dodge them. Dong Zhou's outbursts would instill a grudge within Li Bu. Following his duties as Dong Zhou's bodyguard, it is noted that he had an affair with one of Dong Zhou's maids. This is probably one of the inspirations for Li Bu's portrayal in the Romance of Three Kingdoms. After nearly getting killed by Dong Zhou, Li Bu was contacted by Wang Yu, a minister within the central government. The minister informed Li Bu of his plot to assassinate Dong Zhou and required Li Bu's support in doing so. Although Li Bu was apprehensive, saying that the two were father and son. However, Wang Yu argued that they didn't share a connection by blood, and also that Dong Zhou was never concerned with his son's safety in the first place, reinforcing Li Bu's grudge against his guardian. So, it was recorded that Dong Zhou's headless corpse was left to burn away on the streets. The fire was stated to be comparable to the brilliance of the sun. Meeting with Yan Su. Following Dong Zhou's assassination, Li Bu sought shelter under Yan Su, presenting Dong Zhou's head to the accomplished general. This event is interpreted differently in both the Record of Three Kingdoms and the Book of the Later Han. However, in both documents, Yan Su declines Li Bu because of his dubious nature and his betrayal of other generals in the past. Under Yan Sa. Following his failed acceptance, Li Bu sought Yan Su's brother, Yan Sa. After helping Yan Sa defeat another general, Li Bu joined Yansa's army with zero difficulty. However, his stay was limited thanks to Li Bu's arrogance, claiming that both Yansa and Yansu owed him for assassinating Dong Zhou. Due to Li Bu's contempt, Yansa was getting more and more displeased, ultimately culminating in an attempt to assassinate Li Bu. Li Bu sensed this intent and quickly sent in his 2-week notice. In the start of his departure from Yansa, Li Bu was escorted by Yansa's soldiers, and during the night, they went into Li Bu's tent and killed the person inside, reporting that the job was finished. However, Li Bu had left the tent before the assassination, and had left a member of his own army as a decoy. Although Yansa sent his men after him, Li Bu dispatched all of them, essentially escaping scot-free. Meeting with Zheng Miao. While fleeing from Yansa's forces, Li Bu stopped by the Yan province and met Zheng Miao, an administrator under Cao Cao. Zheng Miao received him and treated him generously, easily befriending the roaming warlord. Before leaving, the two swore to a pledge of friendship. However, this little interaction didn't go unnoticed by General Yansa, who held an ongoing feud against Zheng Miao. Around this time, Yansa took part in an alliance with Cao Cao, who was the primary ruler over Yan province. So, if the feud got in the way of the alliance, Yansa and Cao Cao's forces may as well target Zheng Miao. Keep this in mind for later. Under Zheng Yang. After forging a friendship with Zheng Miao, Li Bu would later join Zheng Yang, a fellow warlord from the same province. Unbeknownst to Li Bu, Zheng Yang was bribed by some of Dong Zhou's retainers to kill the traitorous Li Bu. However, Zheng Yang disobeyed the bribe, and secretly offered Li Bu refuge under his leadership. However, his stay under Zheng Yang was short-lived, instead opting to lead under Zheng Miao. The Battle of Yan Province. Due to the murder of his own father, Cao Cao began a campaign against Tao Qian of Shu province, thus leaving Yan vulnerable to other generals or insurgents. Remember Zheng Miao? Well, he was convinced by defectors from Cao Cao's army to start a rebellion within Yan province, inviting Li Bu to join in as well. With support from the rebellion, Li Bu declared himself governor of Yan province, forcing many of Cao Cao's allies to defect to Li Bu's cause. Following this event, Cao Cao would abort his campaign entirely to focus on reclaiming his territory from Li Bu. This conflict would be known as the Battle for Yan Province, lasting approximately 100 days through both a drought and a famine, ultimately culminating in Cao Cao's victory over Li Bu. Under Liu Bei. Following his defeat, Li Bu would be given shelter by Liu Bei of Shu province. Although Liu Bei was treated with the utmost respect from Li Bu, he at no point ever trusted him as he knew of Li Bu's reputation. Their tenuous relationship would be interrupted by none other than Yan Su, who was busy in a campaign against Shu province. By emphasizing his gratitude for killing Dong Zhou, he was successful in rallying Li Bu to his side in a plot to defeat Liu Bei. Li Bu, probably ecstatic that he finally got his attention, was happy to oblige. On the night of his third major betrayal, Li Bu entered the city of Saipai through a gate opened by the city's own forces. With his army already in the city, Li Bu captured the city, collecting Liu Bei's family and belongings. During the capture of Saipai, Yan Su was able to best Liu Bei and began to invade Shu province. Due to these two defeats, Liu Bei would eventually flee to Yan province with his family, whereas Li Bu stayed, becoming the governor of Shu province. War with Yan Su. After conquering Shu province, Yan Su followed in the footsteps of Wang Mang and called himself the Emperor, declaring the beginning of the Tang dynasty. Since this period is still called the Eastern Han, you don't really need an explanation as to what happens next. While all the generals loyal to the Han were getting prepared to jump his bitch ass, Yan Su was busy forging an alliance with Li Bu via marriage. At this point, Li Bu had a daughter and Yan Su had a son. However, since declaring himself emperor and considering his rejection of Li Bu in the past, Li Bu declined the marriage because not only did he dislike Yan Su, but he attracted divine punishment. Now angered by Li Bu's rejection, Yan Su's allies Han Tian, Yang Fong, and Chang Sun were sent to attack Li Bu. However, Li Bu convinced both Han Tian and Yang Fong to betray Yan Su by emphasizing their leader's treachery against the Han Emperor, saying that the only way to redeem themselves is to betray Yan Su's trust. And of course, Li Bu was willing to share the spoils that came along with it. With the combined might of Li Bu, Han Tian, and Yang Fong, they defeated Sang Sun and began invading Yan Su's territory. Although the three generals retreated, Yan Su would lose much of his territory due to invasions by Cao Cao and Liu Bei, further diminishing Yan Su's power. The Battle of Saipai. Li Bu's final standoff against Cao Cao was at the Battle of Saipai. Shortly before the siege, Go Sun, a commander in league with Li Bu, successfully defeated Liu Bei and Cao Cao's reinforcements, capturing Liu Bei's family and sending them back to Li Bu. This action most likely prompted both Cao Cao and Liu Bei to launch a campaign against Li Bu, culminating in a siege at Saipai. Although Li Bu's soldiers were far more aware of their enemy, the two generals proved more troublesome, completely cutting off Li Bu from the outside world. From this point, Li Bu requested aid from Yan Su, a general he had betrayed in the past. Even though he knew he was reluctant, Li Bu attempted to bring his daughter to him. This was until he was met by arrows upon leaving the city. Therefore, Li Bu decided to stay inside the confines of Saipai. Although a few attempts to disrupt Cao Cao's supply line were made, Li Bu was unsuccessful and was brought back into Saipai. As expected, Yan Su never came with any support, leaving Li Bu a caged animal. Despite his advantage, Cao Cao was unable to conquer Saipai and was prepared to leave, but was talked out of it by his advisors. The siege would then last a total of 3 months. Li Bu was forced to surrender because his subordinates committed a mutiny by leading his troops to surrender. Now let's talk about his execution. A. Can you loosen the bonds? A tiger must be restrained at all times. Tell you what, you let me go and I'll pacify the entire nation for you, no strings attached. Sir. Dude, shut up. You took my family hostage not once but twice. I'm capping your ass right here, man. No hard feelings. Li Bu was later hanged alongside his commanders. They were beheaded and buried in Su province. First, I must apologize for skipping some events for the sake of clarity. But since I committed to making this video, I never want to cover the Han Dynasty ever again. I found this dynasty in particular so damn boring compared to the Qin and the Three Warring States. However, based on Li Bu's history, his representation in media such as video games, book, and manga/anime do not really stray that far from reality. Sure, aspects of his love life have been incredibly dramatized, but you can make liberties like that because there is historical precedent for it. He was a warlord, you know, he ain't no saint. But if you depict Li Bu as a tough guy on a horse, cutting down swats at people with a halberd and taking up a sour in the blood of his enemies, that's completely fine. He was a warlord. There's always precedent for it. Li Bu is handled particularly well because Chinese history is one of the most well-documented affairs ever. No country compares besides probably India. It is in fact preserved so well, it was remarked to be monotonous, obscure, and worst of all, there is far too much of it. So all in all, Li Bu is represented pretty well. Hi, it's the cyborg whale named after Italian cheese and a dessert item. This is definitely a departure from my regular song and dance. However, if you found this video enjoyable, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Following the order of events in Record of Ragnarok, my next video on the matter will be discussing Adam, the progenitor of humanity. Although a tad risky, I'll admit, I'll try my best. Until then, goodbye.